everybody, and welcome to the very first of our new daily series, and this is called We'll Do It Live. And the reason why we're doing this is because, as you know, the pandemic, unprecedented in living memory, is upon us, and that makes campaigning in the time of coronavirus really hard. But I want to be able to reach out to Vermonters, and I think there's lots of information that I'd like to share that we can really discuss. The universe works in very mysterious ways. This is the first time I'm running for office. I've been a candidate for some 3 months now, and then I have a background in healthcare and health policy, and now we have coronavirus. So I just feel like it's all coming together in a very strange way, but I want to use it in positively and be able to talk about this issue, alleviate fears, counter misinformation, and just be a place where I can answer questions. And we have this half an hour. We're doing it every day. And I hope that this could be a way that we can connect and stay connected and learn something. And I said ask Meg anything, so please comment your questions in the comment sections, or you can email at info@Hansen, Hansen for Vermont.com. And so let's get started. So I do have a few questions that people have sent in, but I'm going to start with just a few comments about the pandemic and what we're really facing. I shared an article that I wrote recently about 3 ways that Vermont can be prepared for this pandemic, and I'd like to get into that. But before I do that, here's what I'm listening and what I understand. Public health and the economy. Okay, these are 2 factors that we need to consider when we're looking at the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic. And the way I see it is that these are just 2 sides of the same coin. However, as the crisis exacerbates, as it worsens, and an economic downturn, or maybe a recession or a depression, is also looming on the horizon, some of our leaders are feeling compelled to choose one over the other, maybe sacrifice one over the other. So yesterday at the press conference in the evening, President Trump talked about how he's eager to get the economy reopened. He said Americans are full of women, a vigor, or something like that. And he said that, you can't really keep us cooped up. We really have to get going. And also, we're the largest economy. So, think about the ramifications. There's so many businesses that if they're closed for a long time won't be able to come back. So there's one aspect of that. Also, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo talked about it, and Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick talked about the need to reopen our economy. But I see that Governor Phil Scott and Congressman Peter Welch, they are looking at it in a different way. They foresee a very prolonged and protracted economic shutdown, and they're anticipating that and preparing for it. So what does that mean in terms of Vermont? Are we ready for it? How are we going to face it? How are we going to manage it? I think that if we are going to look at months of economic shutdown and we are going to say, okay, public health crisis is number 1 and we really need to focus on that, then the question arises, how can we be most prepared? We've got to mitigate the spread of this virus, and we've got to maximize community preparedness. So the first step here, what I have called for, and I will reiterate, is suspension of Vermont's Certificate of Need laws. Now, Certificate of Need also is known as con laws. So what does that mean? This seems like a very weird, obscure laws, but actually it really affects our ability to take care of every Vermonter, every American who needs medical attention, who may need medical attention. So basically, there are 35 states, including Vermont, that enact these laws. And what they do is that they artificially limit the number of healthcare resources that are available in a state. So let's say the number of hospitals, hospital beds, surgical centers. So on average, the states enact about 14 of these regulations. Vermont, though, is number 1. We have 30 of these con laws. And as a result of that, according to a study that was published in 2017, we have 6 less hospitals than we would have had it not been for these laws. So Vermont Digger did an article. It's called "Is Vermont Ready?" and it's by their healthcare reporter and Anne Galloway. And they go on and on. You know, this massive, extensive data charts about, you know, how we don't have enough beds, how we don't have enough ventilators or ICU units. And notice that in the entire report, there's no talk about certificate of need laws at all. If we were to suspend it right now, if Governor Phil Scott and the leaders in the legislature were to say, okay, we're suspending it, automatically that would increase our ability to have more hospital beds, more ventilators, more equipment, more protective gear for medical professionals. And how is that? Well, so let me just quickly explain how the con laws work. So because we have these laws, and we have 30 laws, the maximum in the nation, before a provider can open a hospital or expand beds or do anything of that sort, they need to get permission from state authorities, like from the Green Mountain Care Board, the legislature, before they can do that. However, what happens is, well, the idea is that it keeps the costs down. So you don't want to have excess. You have to be able to show, okay, there is sufficient need, there are enough patients, and therefore that justifies opening up a new hospitals or increasing the number of beds. But this becomes very politicized because often the state doesn't give permission. Why? Because it's trying to protect the monopoly that's held by University of Vermont. And this is not just in Vermont. You always have government-protected monopolies, politically powerful monopolies, and that say, you know what? No, we don't actually want economic competition. We don't want to have to compete with some other center, another hospital center, so don't give them permission. And so as a result of that, what happens is that our ability to provide health care suffers. The cost of healthcare goes up. And in the case of a pandemic, we become ill-prepared to do that. So that's why suspending certificate of need laws should be something that we're calling for. And I really hope that Governor Phil Scott and the legislature will look into suspending it. And it's not something that's out of the blue. Just recently in North Carolina, the Health and Human Services there has suspended it. And so now they don't need to get permission to add more hospital beds. That's something that people here are really worried about. As I said, people are saying that there will be an expected surge in the number of COVID-19 patients. And so we won't have enough beds. Well, just suspend the laws and that should take care of it, right? So that's the first point that I want to talk about. These are restrictive laws. These are crony laws. They have nothing to do with improving healthcare quality. But they do limit access. And right now, we really need to look at suspending them immediately. I would think that's number one. And number two is suspending or removing altogether the plastic bag ban that will go into effect starting July. And New Hampshire has done that. Governor Chris Sununu has done that. Governor Phil Scott has, I think he did a really great job on Twitter of calling out and applauding our grocery workers, people who are working really hard to, make sure that the supply chain remains intact. Well, then COVID is a very highly contagious disease that spreads via droplets in the air and fomites. And fomites are just objects where the virus stays infectious. It doesn't live. They don't live, but it's just infectious. So, if you touch it, and then you touch your face, that's how it spreads. It's transmitted from one person to another. So numerous studies have shown this, but you don't really need studies because we just have common sense to know that a reusable shopping bag becomes like a reservoir of infection. And we don't want grocery workers and we don't want our fellow Vermonters to be touching that and exposing themselves to those fomites. And plastic bags have a much, much lower risk of transmission. And so I would say getting rid of the ban and making sure that doesn't go into effect starting July would be a great way to protect our workers. Okay. And the third one is a little more complicated. It's about going to all payer and the One Care Vermont and how they can be of service. But before I get into that, I just want to say that I think right now it's really important for us not to engage in partisan discussion. I think it's very important to have reasoned, calm, and nonpartisan discourse. But there is a political angle that I would like to emphasize, and this is for all Vermonters. Um, please, please be careful, and I mean, please keep an eye out for people who are in leadership and people who want to be in leadership, and see what is that impulse that they have. Are they moving toward hoarding power, or are they moving toward expanding opportunities to face this crisis head on? So I don't want to use the word tyranny because that has many complications, but it's the dichotomy between tyranny and liberty. Are we moving towards deregulation and getting rid of red tape and bureaucracy and allowing innovation to take place and face this crisis, confront this crisis head on? Or are we trying to suspend democratic processes, hoard power, centralize power, and say, no, it's a crisis, and so therefore we need to hold on to power, and we know best, and so we are going to drive the agenda? I think that when there are some people who are showing the latter and some people who are showing the former, and I'm very mindful of the fact that I want to support people in leadership who are moving toward more liberty and liberalization. So cutting red tape, getting rid of bureaucracy, bureaucratic processes, and massive deregulation. I think that is what is really called for in terms of being very prepared as a healthcare system as we deal with this pandemic. So the problem, now talking about red tape, one of the reasons why we got off on the wrong foot was because we didn't have widespread testing. And the reason why this happened was actually because of bureaucracy. So on January 31st, the FDA declared, or the federal government declared, the COVID pandemic as a public health emergency. And so when it did that, it activated emergency protocols. And one of them was to prioritize the test made by the CDC. And the CDC test was faulty. So what happened is that we have labs and hospitals all across the nation where they could have come and developed the test. We are number one in terms of medical capacity, medical technology, and innovation. So we could have done that. But because of bureaucracy and red tape, the CDC test got number one priority. All the other ones were, put to the side, or, FDA was saying, we're not going to give you permission. We're not going to consider that. We're just going to push the CDC test. But the CDC test was faulty. And so there was a big void that private sector could not step in and fill. Now, of course, there's been a reverse in policy, which I welcome. And we've seen a lot of relaxation of regulations. Of course, now we have testing, but the FDA has also authorized states to allow labs that are within their borders to develop more tests. We've seen authorization from the Health and Human Services to allow doctors and physicians to practice across state lines. And that's going to go very far in dealing with a shortage of physicians, especially in places like New York and California and Washington State, where they're very hard hit. So in terms of, deregulating and liberalizing, I think that's going in the right direction, and we in Vermont should also follow suit. I think that's definitely where we're going to go at. Okay, let's see. We have something we have a comment about the bags. We need a governing body, not rulers. That's true. That's the whole point about going from side to side. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about, I have a question. My question is about, it's about how does this end, and a vaccination, whether a vaccination is the answer to go. And the question is really about asking me my stance on mandatory vaccination. And so there are many ways in which the coronavirus pandemic will end. but we don't know exactly because it's a new virus and we don't have enough information on it. One way is if we actually get a cure, and many people are doing clinical trials right now where they're looking at chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine. These are anti-malarial drugs that have shown some activity in stopping the virus from reproducing. And so there's some potential there. There's also other antiviral drugs, the ones that were used against Ebola and HIV, that might have some benefits in stopping the replication of COVID. So COVID-19 is coronavirus 19, and the name of the virus, they're calling it SARS-CoV-2. So this is a brand new human virus. And so we've never experienced it before. So they're just still trying different tests to see what could happen. So we could have a therapeutic cure for it. It could just fizzle out, burn through. Some people say, some scientists are saying that even if it goes through like, it's a bell curve where you have a maximum infections and then it kind of tapers out. After that, it might become endemic, which means it'll still be around, like the flu virus is around. We get it a couple of times a year, so it might be that we might develop immunity to it, and so it won't be so harsh when we get it. Again, this is all speculation. I don't know. No one knows for sure what will happen. Or the third thing is massive vaccination. Now, at this point, I want to say that a safe and effective vaccination is at least 2 years away. So we shouldn't really be talking about that at all because it's really far out. People are looking into developing a vaccination. I don't know if it can be developed. This is a brand new coronavirus. Coronaviruses are zoonotic diseases. They occur naturally in animals, not in humans. And so it had to jump from animal species to human species. And this is a new one, it's called a spillover effect, where DNA goes from an animal species to a human species. And so it's just uncharted territory completely. But speaking on vaccination, I want to bring up example of what happened in 1976. So there was a swine flu outbreak, and people, the media, everybody got really worried that this could be a massive outbreak. And then President Gerald Ford, he launched a very aggressive mass vaccination, mass inoculation program. And he said that every American man, woman, and child will be vaccinated. And so nearly 25% of the US population at that time, was 45 million, got this vaccination. But this vaccination was developed in record time, in 10 months. Usually it takes about 18 months to do the right tests. You don't want to rush it, but they rushed it because they said, no, this is going to be a massive outbreak. And we need to be proactive, and we need to be aggressive. Well, they didn't test the vaccine properly. And so what happened is that many people who were vaccinated started reporting a new paralyzing condition, which is now known as Guillain-Barré syndrome. It's a paralyzing condition, and it was 450 people were diagnosed with it. How many people actually died of swine flu? 200. And so it didn't turn out to be the outbreak that people expected it to be. And instead, this horrible paralyzing condition was inflicted upon the people. So I think that's something that we really need to be careful of. This is a tale of caution from the past that is very important even today. So I would definitely not support mandatory vaccination. I would not support that. In general, I don't support government mandating any aspect of our lives, especially not this. So if they are able to develop it, and it is effective and it is safe, I'm talking about 2 years from now, and if coronavirus, or COVID becomes endemic, something that happens every year, then just like the flu shot, we get a flu shot, and that would be something to consider. This is long term. This is not something that we're going to be considering right now. Okay. So my next question that I have is, okay, so, well, Governor Phil Scott this comes from Dan, and he's saying, Governor Phil Scott might be issuing a stay-at-home order in the next couple of days. And so how do I feel about that? I think this would be going back to what I said in the beginning about public health and the economy being two sides of the same coin, and COVID pandemic is requires both. I mean, if you actually think about it, right? I mean, without people, you don't have a booming economy, but without healthy people, you don't have a booming economy. But the public health crisis is part of that. It's basically about people in a society, and that's sort of the underlying thing holding us together. So I don't think that we should have to forfeit one for the other. I do know that that the president had called for 15 days of stay at home, quarantine, kind of keep low, and then from next week he does want to reopen the economy. Whereas Governor Phil Scott has said, let me see, in the press conference, he had a press conference with Congressman Peter Welch, and they're saying that this is going to be many months in the making. They're expecting that, and they're preparing for that. Again, it really depends on the data. So right now we have 95 cases of coronavirus in Vermont, and 7 people have died. So if they're expecting more cases, and if that's the direction, I'm going to defer to them to look at the data and see where we are at. That's not to say I'm not mindful of the fact that many people's livelihoods are on the line, and especially small businesses. Yes, we're talking about help. We're talking about giving small business loans. I think even if they are able to act together in Congress about giving out money to American families. But I haven't seen the data yet, so I don't know what's the direction? Are we going to go like this till July? Is that the way to go? So I'm still right now, I'm still learning and taking the data in. I will say this though, and this is something that we in Vermont, of all the states, we have to be really mindful of. A lot of the economic analyses say that just as the states were recovering from the Great Recession of 2008, the coronavirus pandemic hit. Okay, but just a few weeks ago, The Economist, it's a British magazine, they did an article saying that while 49 states had recovered from the Great Recession, one state still was reeling under the effects, and that was Vermont, because of our really weak structured economy. Our economy is really weak. We have mountains of red tape and draconian regulations, especially land use restrictions. Some of you might know about it. Act 250 is just the tip of the iceberg. There are many land use restrictions in Vermont. And there's just no private sector. If you think about it, we have a very, very strong anti-business climate. And we've seen an exodus of large businesses, and with that, young people, what people call the demographic crisis. But why is that happening? Because there are no upwardly mobile careers, no upwardly mobile job opportunities for young people to create wealth and to own property. It's not just about having a job for the sake of having a job. If you want to be able to create wealth, own a home, be able to afford to have children, raise them, save for retirement, then you need an upwardly mobile career, and you need a strong private sector, a strong business economy. And we don't have that in Vermont. So going into this, we have a very shaky foundation. So that really worries me. And then if our leadership is looking at months of an economic shutdown, I don't know right now. So this is a very fluid situation. It's changing every hour, every day. And I'll be here again at 6 p.m. tomorrow. So, I'll have more information, and I'll be able to talk more about it then. Okay. And so I have one more question. I have time for one more question today. And yes, and that's my friend, Stu. And he's asking, Vermonters are understandably fearful about the virus and its implications. And so he's asked me, what would you say to Vermonters who are fearful? this is what I'll say. I'll say that all your fears are absolutely legitimate, and I share them. But there are many, many positives that we can focus on. First is that we live in an age of advanced modern medicine, the most advanced that human civilization has ever seen. Second, we live in the United States of America, and the United States of America is light years ahead of any other nation in terms of medical innovation, technology, the state of knowledge that we have. The third thing is that we have the internet. You know what that means? That means instant knowledge sharing. At any moment, whether there's a breakthrough in a lab in Australia or Malaysia or Hungary, we know right away. We're sharing the information, we're learning. They're doing clinical trials in India, in China, in Canada, all over, and we're able to share this information. So we're doing clinical trials for new drugs, developing vaccines, learning, studying the molecular makeup of the virus, trying to understand how it affects humans. This is amazing. It's an amazing time to be, working on a breakthrough medicine for this pandemic. And then, of course, we have good leadership, right? I think that's one very important thing, is that yes, there's partisanship. Absolutely. Yes, people are sensationalizing and politicizing it. But the people that we've elected, the people care about us, right? They care about you. And so we're trying to do our best. I think people in all our ways. I mean, I've seen the community come together, whether it's delivering groceries to elderly Vermonters, our neighbors, helping out in any way, volunteering. I mean, we're seeing so many examples of Americans come together and support one another during this time. So definitely, I know that we'll be able to see this through. And finally, I'll say that, I mean, I believe in God. I have very strong faith. Other people perhaps believe in some other form of higher power, maybe the universe, well, whatever you believe in. I know that now is the time to really dig deep, as I am doing, and to ask for guidance. How can I be of service to my fellow Americans, to my neighbors, to my friends, to my families? How can I help? How can I do my best and use the skill set that I have, the experience that I have, the privileges and blessings that I have, whether it's a car that I can drive, or I have some extra money that I can give to someone who's in need. I mean, there's so many ways that we can use our own, what God has blessed us with, to help other people, and digging deep into that, and coming together, knowing that we are all in this together, and that we have technology, we have medicine, we have all the great breakthroughs on our side. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of being patient and being in this together. And so that's really the ethos of this show, which is why I'm going to be here every day from 6 to 6:30 p.m. I'll answer your questions, any questions you have. And it doesn't have to just be about coronavirus. It could be about any aspect of, current affairs, what's going on. If you have a personal question that you think I can answer, I'll be happy to be of service. So I think with that, I'll end it. I'll see you here, same time again, where we'll do it live at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Thank you.